Hello, everybody. Tate Davis here with another album review for you. What album we're going to be reviewing today, my kiddies? Take a good long look. UFO, No Place to Run from 1980. This is actually my first album review this is my first review of a UFO album. Kind of an odd first album review by UFO kind of a first choice, kind of an odd choice for a first review by UFO, but this is the only UFO album that I currently own on vinyl. I have definitely listened to the Shankar era stuff, which is awesome. I've listened to pretty much all of UFO's discography at least once, and they're a great, very, very underrated band that were very influential on the new wave of British heavy metal movement in the 80s, and lots of heavy metal guitar players named Michael Schenker as an influence, and lots of singers named Phil Mogg as an influence. So very, very underrated band. This particular release is their first album with Paul Chapman after Michael Schenker left in 1978 to form the Michael Schenker Group. He had a huge alcohol problem at that point. Well, the entire band had an alcohol problem, but him and Phil Mogg were just not getting along. And after the Obsession tour, on which the live album Strangers in the Night was recorded, Schenker was done. By the time Strangers in the Night came out in 1979, Schenker was done. Fresh out of Lone Star, this gentleman had also played in UFO a few times, going in and out, cycling in and out between, sometimes playing with Michael, before leaving UFO to go form Lone Star, and then after that, I think Lone Star broke up, or I don't know, he left Lone Star, whatever the case. In comes Paul Chapman on guitar to take over from where Schenker left off, and while in my opinion he's not as good of a guitar player as Michael Schenker, Paul Chapman comes really close. He is a great guitar player. He's a Welshman. So this is the first of 4 albums with Paul Chapman on guitar. So speaking of personnel, who else do we have in the band here? So we got on vocals, we got Phil Mogg, the aforementioned Paul Chapman on guitars, Pete Way on bass, Paul Raymond on keyboards, rhythm guitar and backing vocals, and then Andy Parker on drums. So, this is the cover. This is the back cover. No inner gate sleeve with this one. It was produced by George Martin, who produced the Beatles and Cheap Trick and the Ramones. I don't know if he produced the Ramones. No, he didn't. But George Martin had produced Cheap Trick around this time as well. Let's see, it was recorded at George Martin's AIR Studios in Montserrat, where a lot of other famous albums were recorded. The Police recorded a few albums there. Dire Straits recorded a few albums there. It was engineered by Jeff Emmerich, who had been working with George Martin for years. Steve Churchyard acted as an additional engineer for this one. Tape operators, you don't care about that. It was, I think overdubs were done at, or more recording was done at the London branch of AIR Studios. The Hypnosis designed the album cover. 3 years later, they would go out of business. Hypnosis designed a whole bunch of album covers, including Dark Side of the Moon and Houses of the Holy and stuff like that. Jeff Emmerich, George Martin, and UFO are credited with mixing. Now, it is kind of debatable how involved George Martin was actually with this album. I listened to an interview with Paul Chapman. Eddie Trunk was interviewing him, and he said, well, George didn't really, it's discredited, he didn't really do much to help out, or something to that effect, and that Jeff Emmerich was really the one doing most of the mixing. So, if I'm not mistaken, I think this is probably one of the not too long, or like 5 or 10 years after this album was recorded, the Montserrat branch ended up getting destroyed by a hurricane, which is kind of sad because from what I've been hearing, what I've seen pictures of it, it looked like a really nice studio. So poor George Martin. Oh well. And it's got a little address right here that you can write to the UFO fan club if you're so inclined. Although by this point, I think a lot of Michael Schenker fanboys had jumped ship from UFO because UFO without Michael Schenker, yeah, there was one, and Mick Bolton, but those albums didn't really go anywhere in the U.S. or Britain. This actually charted pretty high. This actually charted pretty high on the UK album charts. But Michael Schenker was such a beloved figure that a lot of fans, at least in the U.S., they pretty much Michael Schenker leaving UFO pretty much blew any chance of UFO actually having any mainstream success in the United States because Schenker was such a beloved figure. But nonetheless, Paul Chapman ended up getting a lot of shit from fans. But enough history. Let's get into the song, shall we? So side one, we kick off with the little instrumental kind of sound collage here called Alpha Centauri. And according to that, according to Paul Chapman in his interview with Eddie Trunk back in, I think it was 2015, he said that George Martin actually convinced the band to put it on the album. It was originally supposed to be a tape backing track played as the band got ready to go on stage to help introduce the band, but George Martin convinced them to put it on the album. It's good. It kind of warms you up from it kind of really gets you hyped up, and ready for what's to come. And of course, what is to come is Letting Go, side one, track 2. Very catchy riff, very catchy riff in that song. Solid timekeeping by Andy Parker. Phil Mogg belting it out as he does, really great right from the gut. Great guitar solo by Paul Chapman at the end. Letting Go is a great rocker. Side 1, track 3, their cover of the Junior Parker and his... What was it? Junior Parker and his Blue Flames or something like that. Junior Parker. The Junior Parker song Mystery Train, which Elvis did a version of back in the early 50s. UFO do a really good job of this. Very aggressive sounding, bluesy, fast, almost kind of metallic in some cases. Phil Mogg again belting them out. The first verse is acoustic. Paul Chapman plays an acoustic guitar here, and then the second verse of Phil going train, and then all the rest of the band kicking in there. Just a great bluesy, fast, kind of metallic rocker here. Yeah, Mystery Train, great cover. Side 1, track 4. This Fire Burns Tonight starts off with a classic intro, simplistic drum intro by Andy Parker, just really laying it down, and just a mid-tempo rocker. This fire burns tonight, the streets are alive. Really catchy chorus. Nothing really much more to say about it. A great guitar solo by Paul Chapman. There's Paul Chapman guitar-o-rama on this album. And then side 1, track 5 to close out. The side is Gone in the Night, which is part sweet ballad, part hard rocker when it goes into the respective verse and choruses. Very, very great way to close out side 1. Again, catchy. Gone in the Night. A lot of syncopation with cymbal crashes in here and accents in this song. Really, really great way to close out side 1, as mentioned before. Flip over the vinyl, we got side 2, we got Youngblood. I like Youngblood. It's kind of a throwaway song. Side 2 on this album, I think, is definitely... Side 1 is very strong. Side 2, I think, is quite a bit weaker. Youngblood is good. It's catchy. Nothing really much to say here. Side 2, track 2. Probably my favorite song on the album. The title track, No Place to Run. Durr, 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 durr. Paul Raymond with the synth there, and Phil Mogg belting out about a fight that's going to take place. Joey going to the east side, taking the subway and going to a fight, and everybody expecting him to win, and Jungle Land, and yeah, No Place to Run, a live staple for the band on during the years with Chapman and live concerts, and just a great rocker, great slow kind of mid-paced rocker. Side 2, track 3, completely opposite from the mood of No Place to Run, is Take It or Leave It, a short 3-minute acoustic power ballad, done very well, very sweet. Phil Mogg, again, Phil Mogg, what made him a really great singer was that he was able to belt out those hard rockin' tunes, but at the same time he was able to pull back with a sweet crooning, and was able to sing ballads really well. Much like Ronnie James Dio, except Phil Mogg didn't quite have the same range as Ronnie James Dio did. Not that he needed it for UFO's music. Side 2, track 4, Money Money. Again, this is kind of a fun tune, a kind of a throwaway song. Money. It's fun. Not one of my favorites on the album. And then side 2, track 5 to close out the album, Any Day. Just that synth bass and Phil Mogg singing those verses, really quiet, and then all of a sudden, any day, it just catches you by surprise like a headshot out of nowhere, and man, just a great piano, and then forte, and then piano, and forte, and just the dueling between soft and loud is really takes its toll on this song, and it's really great. So, great way to close out the album. So that is my review of, so is my overall review of the album. I love No Place to Run. It's probably my favorite of the Paul Chapman era of UFO. UFO would continue on for 3 more albums until 1983, when an ever-dwindling commercial failure. Each album they would continue to release after this one charted lower and lower in major territories, and eventually in 1983 they would break up. And Phil Mogg would... Oh, I should also mention that Paul Raymond, after this album came out, he jumped ship to go join the Michael Schenker group, and he was replaced by Neil Carter. And then after 1983, UFO broke up, and then Phil Mogg got a new lineup together with Paul Raymond and released the Misdemeanor album, but that's a story for another day. So, a great album, UFO, No Place to Run. It came out in 1980. Listen to it. Thank you guys very much for watching, and stay tuned for more stuff like this in the future. We'll see you guys later.